My pregnant stepmother made me sign over the property that was supposed to belong to me, her unborn child. It turned out that she was not his child. So, my mom passed away a couple of years ago, and it hit my dad hard. He's not the same guy anymore, just quiet, like he's checked out half the time. He used to be the one cracking jokes at dinner, but now he barely says a word. Then this woman came into the picture. Dad met her somewhere, I don't even know where, and suddenly she's living in our house. She's all loud and pushy, the total opposite of him now. Behind his back, she acts like I don't exist, like I'm just some piece of furniture that's in her way. But when he's around, she flips a switch and starts treating me like I'm her kid or something. It's fake as hell, and I see right through it. I tried talking to Dad about her once. Laid it all out, told him I don't trust her, don't recognize her as part of this family. He just looked at me with these sad eyes and started crying. Said she's all he has left. That's dumb. I'm his son, been here my whole life, and he's saying she's all he has? I couldn't believe he'd say that to my face. It's not like I walked out on him after Mom died. I stuck around, tried to keep things together. But apparently, that doesn't count for much when she's in the room. Things got worse after that. Money started disappearing. Not big chunks, just little bits here and there. Stuff Mom left for me, like cash for a car or whatever, suddenly it's gone. I'd ask Dad about it, and he'd mumble something vague. Then I'd see her with a new handbag or some random crap she didn't need. It didn't take a genius to figure out where it was going. She was bleeding him dry, and he was too broken to notice. I started keeping track, but it was already too late to stop the small stuff. That's when I realized she wasn't just a leech, she was playing a bigger game. Things took a turn when I overheard her talking to Dad one night. I was in the kitchen grabbing water, and they were in the living room. She started going on about how if she's his new wife, all the property should be in her name. Said she needed security because Dad could just up and leave her one day. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This house, our house, has been in the family forever. Mom's name was still on the deed, even after she passed. It was supposed to go to me eventually, that was always the plan. And here's this woman, barely a year into Dad's life, trying to snatch it all up. I wasn't about to let that slide. I walked right in and told Dad she was out of her mind. Pointed out how she'd already burned through my money. Did he really think she'd stop there? He just sat there, looking tired, while she glared at me like I'd ruined her big moment. I told him straight up, don't do it. Don't sign anything over to her. She's not family, she's not Mom, and she doesn't deserve a single brick of this place. He didn't say much, just nodded a little, and I thought maybe I'd gotten through to him. After that, she stopped pretending to be nice. No more fake smiles or acting like she cared about me. It was open war between us, and I didn't care one bit. I kept pushing Dad to put the property in my name instead, lock it down before she could twist his head around again. He'd listen, say he'd think about it, but he never did anything. I could tell he was torn, stuck between me and her. I figured I had time to keep working on him. Then she dropped a bomb that changed everything. She was pregnant. When she told Dad she was pregnant, it was like a switch flipped in him. I'd never seen him light up like that since Mom died. He was smiling, talking about the future, acting like this was some kind of miracle. All the stuff I'd been hammering into him about the property? Gone. He didn't mention it again, didn't even look at me the same way. It was all about her, and the baby now. I tried bringing it up once, just to remind him what we talked about, but he brushed me off. Said we'd figure it out later. Later never came. Her attitude got worse too. Now that she had this kid on the way, she acted like she owned the place already. Started talking about how the house needed to be ready for the baby. Like it wasn't good enough as it was. She'd throw out these little jabs about how she wasn't alone anymore, she had a child to think about. That was her new card to play, and she played it hard. Dad ate it up. He started agreeing with her more, nodding along whenever she brought up the property. I could see where it was heading, and I didn't like it one bit. Then it happened. One day, I came home, and Dad told me he'd signed everything over to her. The house, the land, all of it, gone. Said it was for her and the baby, that it was the right thing to do. I just stared at him. Couldn't even find words. This was the same guy who'd promised me after Mom died that I'd always have a piece of this place. Now he'd handed it to some woman who didn't even belong here, all because she got herself knocked up. I walked out, and didn't talk to him again for months. After Dad signed the property over, I couldn't even look at him. I stayed in the house for a while, but it didn't feel like home anymore. Every room had her fingerprints on it, new curtains she picked out, furniture rearranged how she wanted. I'd pass her in the hall, and she'd give me this smug look, like she'd won. Dad tried talking to me a couple times, asked why I was so quiet, but I just shrugged him off. What was there to say? He'd made his choice, and it wasn't me. I moved out not long after that. Crashed with a friend, got a cheap place eventually. Didn't tell Dad where I was going, he didn't ask either. We didn't speak for the rest of her pregnancy. I'd hear updates through random people, cousins, old neighbors, saying she was getting bigger, that Dad was excited. I didn't care. The whole thing made me sick. Months went by, and then the baby was born. A girl, apparently. Someone texted me about it, but I didn't respond. Didn't see the point in celebrating something that cost me everything. Dad called me a few days after the birth. Left a voicemail saying he missed me, wanted me to come meet the kid. I didn't call back. I was still too pissed at him for giving her the property, pissed at her for worming her way in, pissed at myself for not stopping it sooner. But I couldn't stop thinking about that baby. Something about it nagged at me. She'd been so quick to use the pregnancy as leverage, so sure it'd lock everything down. I started wondering if it was even Dad's. That's when I decided to do something about it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the baby. She'd played the pregnancy card too perfectly, like it was all part of her plan. Dad was so caught up in it, he didn't even question her. But I did. I started digging. Didn't tell anyone what I was up to, didn't trust anyone close to them not to blab. I got my hands on a DNA test kit, one of those mail-in ones. Figured if I could get a sample from the kid, I'd know for sure. The hard part was pulling it off without them catching on. I waited until a few weeks after the birth. Heard through the grapevine that Dad and her were having people over to show off the baby. I showed up unannounced, first time I'd been back since I moved out. Dad was surprised, almost teary-eyed, thinking I was there to make peace. She wasn't happy to see me, but she kept up the act in front of everyone. I played along, acted like I was there for the kid. Held the baby for a minute, made small talk. While I was at it, I swiped a pacifier she'd been chewing on. Slipped it into my pocket when no one was looking. Said my goodbyes and got out fast. Sent the pacifier off with my own sample to compare against Dad's line. Took a couple weeks to get the results, and I didn't tell a soul while I waited. When the envelope finally came, I opened it alone in my apartment. There it was in black and white, no match. The kid wasn't Dad's. I wasn't shocked, but I was furious. She'd lied to him, to everyone, and used it to steal what was mine. Now I had proof. I sat on the DNA results for a day, just staring at the paper. It was real, proof she'd screwed us both over. I didn't know how to tell Dad at first. He was so deep in her web, I wasn't sure he'd even believe me. But I couldn't let it sit. I grabbed the test results, drove back to the house, and walked in without knocking. They were in the living room, her feeding the baby, Dad watching TV. I dropped the envelope on the coffee table and told him to read it. Said it was a DNA test, and it showed the kid wasn't his. She freaked out immediately. Started yelling that I was lying, that I'd faked it to ruin her life. Dad just picked up the paper and read it, slow and quiet. His face went blank, then pale. He asked her if it was true, voice barely above a whisper. She kept shouting, saying I was jealous, that I'd do anything to push her out. But he wasn't listening to her anymore. He looked at me, then back at the results, and I could see it sinking in. He didn't say much after that, just got up and walked out of the room. Left her sitting there, still ranting. Later that night, he called me. Said he'd kicked her out for a few hours to think. Asked if I'd come over. When I got there, he was a mess, crying, apologizing, saying he should have listened to me from the start. I wanted to stay mad, but I couldn't. He's my dad, and he'd been played just as bad as I had. We talked for hours, and by the end, he was ready to fight. The property was still in her name, but now we had leverage. After Dad came around, we started planning. The property was legally hers now, he'd signed it over months ago, but the DNA test gave us a shot. I looked up what we could do online, and it seemed like fraud might be our angle. She'd lied about the baby being his to get him to sign, which had to count for something. Dad was on board, but he was still a wreck, kept blaming himself for not seeing through her sooner. I told him we'd fix it together, no point dwelling on what was done. We hired a lawyer the next week. Guy was expensive, but he knew his stuff. Took one look at the DNA results and the property transfer papers and said we had a case. Said it wouldn't be quick or easy, stuff like this never is, but we could argue she'd manipulated Dad under false pretenses. He filed some initial paperwork to freeze the property, so she couldn't sell it out from under us while things dragged on. That was a relief, at least. Meant we still had a chance to get it back. She didn't take it lying down. Started calling Dad nonstop, leaving voicemails begging him to drop it, saying she'd change. When that didn't work, she switched to threats, said she'd drag us through the mud, make it ugly. I heard one of the messages. She sounded unhinged, yelling about how we'd regret crossing her. Dad stopped picking up after that. Blocked her number and let the lawyer handle it. We found out she'd moved in with some guy across town, probably the real father. Didn't matter to me who he was, I just wanted her out of our lives and the house back in our name. The legal stuff kicked into gear, but it was slow as hell. Months went by with nothing but meetings and paperwork. Our lawyer kept us updated, said the court was taking the fraud claim seriously, especially with the DNA test. Dad had to testify about how she'd convinced him to sign over the property, which was rough. He sat there in this drab courtroom, explaining how he thought the baby was his, how she'd pushed him into it. I could tell it killed him to admit he'd been that blind. She had her own lawyer, some slick guy who tried to paint her as the victim, said Dad was just regretful and I was a spiteful kid trying to ruin her life. Her story didn't hold up great though. The DNA test was hard to argue with, and our lawyer dug up more dirt, texts she'd sent to someone else bragging about securing the bag before the baby was even born. It was messy, and she looked worse every time she opened her mouth. The judge didn't rule right away, said he needed time to review everything. That left us hanging, waiting for weeks. Dad and I stuck together through it though. Moved back into the house since she was gone, even if it wasn't ours on paper yet. Felt good to be there, like we were reclaiming it bit by bit. She kept trying to mess with us outside court too. Showed up at the house once, banging on the door, demanding to get her stuff. We called the cops, and they made her leave. Found out later she'd been telling people Dad abandoned her and the kid, which was a lie. She'd never even let him near the baby after the truth came out. It was all noise. We just kept our heads down and waited for the judge. Finally, after what felt like forever, the judge ruled. Came down a few weeks ago, March 2025 now, so it's been almost a year since this all started. He threw out the property transfer. Said the evidence showed she deceived Dad, used a fake pregnancy story to get him to sign. The house and land went back to him, free and clear. She didn't get a dime, and the judge even ordered her to pay some of our legal fees. Didn't cover everything, but it was something. When Dad got the call from the lawyer, he just sat down and put his head in his hands. Didn't cry this time, just looked relieved, like he could breathe again. We're still sorting out the mess she left. Found out she'd taken loans against the property before we froze it. Lawyer's handling that now. Dad's different these days, still quiet, but not as lost. He apologized again after the ruling, said he'd never let anyone come between us like that again. I forgave him a long time ago, couldn't not, after seeing him fight for this with me. She's gone for good, last I heard. Moved out of town with the kid and whoever she's with now. Don't care where she is, as long as it's not here. The house is ours again. I'm fixing it up, painting over her ugly colors, getting rid of her junk. Dad helps when he can. It's not perfect yet, but it's home. Took a hell of a fight to get it back, but we did. That's what matters. If anyone's dealing with a step-parent pulling this kind of crap, get proof and lawyer up fast. Wish I'd done it sooner.